Recruit. Royal Navy recruits start with no formal rank, but they are the foundation of the ratings ladder they are about to enter. Recruits are in basic and initial professional training, learning seamanship, discipline, and the basics of their future trade. They do not wear rank insignia like anchors or crowns, but they can already be earmarked for a branch such as warfare, engineering, logistics, communications, or medical. This future branch will later appear as a trade badge on the sleeve and, for officers, through branch distinction symbols, while the rank ladder itself remains common to everyone. Able Rating. Able Rating, or Able Seaman, is the first fully trained rank in the Royal Navy ratings ladder and broadly lines up with a British Army private. Able Ratings have completed basic and initial trade training and now work in their chosen branch, such as warfare, engineering, logistics, communications, or medical. On the uniform, they have no specific rank device on the arm, and on the shoulder slide, the wording Royal Navy is shown, with their trade indicated separately by a specialist badge. Promotion from Able Rating to Leading Rating usually takes a few years of good conduct, trade qualification, and passing selection for the next rank. Leading Rating. Leading Rating, also called Leading Hand or Leading Seaman, is the first formal junior leadership rank for Royal Navy ratings, and is roughly equivalent to a corporal in the British Army. Leading Ratings supervise small teams of Able Ratings on watch, in maintenance, training and daily routines in their branch. They wear one large gold-fouled anchor as their rank insignia on both the arm and the shoulder slide, alongside the trade badge that shows whether they are warfare, weapon engineering, marine engineering, logistics, communications, or medical specialists. Promotion to Leading Rating typically requires time in rank as an Able Rating, completion of branch-specific professional courses, and selection when a vacancy exists. Petty Officer. Petty Officer is the next step above Leading Rating and is broadly comparable to a sergeant in the British Army. Petty officers are experienced specialists and first-line managers. A single petty officer might be responsible for leading a small section of around 6 to 12 sailors, supervising watchkeeping, training, maintenance and safety in their branch. On the insignia, petty officers wear two crossed gold-fouled anchors with a crown above them on the arm, and the same crossed anchors and crown device on the shoulder. This design clearly distinguishes them from the single anchor Leading Rating below and the wreath-surrounded Chief Petty Officer above. Promotion into Petty Officer usually takes several years as a Leading Rating plus successful completion of advanced trade and leadership courses, along with selection when positions open. Chief Petty Officer. Chief Petty Officer is the senior rating rank above Petty Officer and below the two Warrant Officer classes and is broadly equivalent to a Staff Sergeant in the British Army. Chief Petty Officers are senior technical leaders who run departments or major sections at sea and ashore, typically supervising several petty officers and often dozens of ratings while acting as the main link between the lower deck and the officers. Their arm rank is shown by 3 small gold buttons or dots in a horizontal line, while the shoulder rank shows a gold laurel wreath surrounding a fouled anchor and crown. Promotion usually comes after many years as a petty officer plus advanced professional and leadership courses, so most new chiefs have roughly 10 to 15 years of service. Warrant Officer Class 2. Warrant Officer Class 2 is the rank above Chief Petty Officer and below Warrant Officer Class 1, roughly comparable to a Warrant Officer Class 2 in the British Army in terms of authority and seniority. Warrant Officer Class 2s are very senior ratings, often with around 15 to 20 years of service, who advise heads of department and commanding officers on discipline, professional standards, and specialist capability across whole departments or units, rather than a single section. Their insignia on both arm and shoulder is a gold laurel wreath surrounding a gold Tudor crown. Promotion into WO2 usually comes only after long service as a Chief Petty Officer, successful completion of the highest professional and leadership courses available to ratings, and competitive selection. Warrant Officer Class 1. Warrant Officer Class 1 is the highest rating rank in the Royal Navy, above Warrant Officer Class 2, and broadly comparable to a Warrant Officer Class 1 in the British Army in status and influence. Warrant Officer Class 1s are the most senior enlisted leaders on the lower deck, typically with well over 20 years of service, acting as principal advisors to commanding officers on discipline, standards, training, and the overall effectiveness of the ship, squadron, or major shore unit. Their insignia on both arm and shoulder is the full Royal Coat of Arms, clearly identifying them as the top non-commissioned and warrant rank in the service. Promotion into Warrant Officer Class 1 usually comes only after long service as a Warrant Officer Class 2. Consistently strong performance reports and selection for the very small number of senior posts that need the Navy's most experienced ratings. Midshipman. Midshipman is the first commissioned officer rank in the Royal Navy, above Warrant Officer Class 1 and roughly comparable to a second lieutenant in the British Army in seniority. Midshipmen have completed initial officer training and are now learning to serve as bridge watchkeeping officers and junior divisional officers, responsible for small groups of sailors and for safely running parts of a watch under supervision. At any one time, there are several hundred midshipmen in the Royal Navy's training and first appointment pipeline. Their insignia on both shoulder and slip-on is a single small round gold button or disc on a white patch. Promotion to sub-lieutenant usually follows after around 2 to 3 years of training and sea time. Sub-lieutenant. Sub-lieutenant is the rank above midshipman and below lieutenant, broadly equivalent to a lieutenant in the British Army in seniority. Sub-lieutenants are qualified junior officers who stand bridge watches, help with navigation and ship handling, and act as divisional officers responsible for the training, discipline, and welfare of a small group of sailors, often around 10 to 20 people. Promotion from midshipman to sub-lieutenant typically follows after about 2 to 3 years of training, exams, and sea time. The insignia on cuff and shoulder is a distinctive Royal Navy executive curl at the front, showing they are commissioned officers on the first rung of the officer ladder. Lieutenant. Lieutenant is the rank above sub-lieutenant and below lieutenant commander, and is broadly equivalent to a captain in the British Army in terms of responsibility. Lieutenants are the core junior officers of the fleet. They serve as qualified watchkeeping officers, heads of small departments, flight officers in aviation units, or key specialists in warfare, engineering, logistics, and other branches. A lieutenant will typically have around 4 to 8 years of commissioned service, depending on branch and training path. The insignia on cuff and shoulder is 2 medium-width gold rings stacked vertically, with the upper ring carrying the Royal Navy Executive Curl, clearly marking them as fully qualified officers with significant day-to-day command responsibilities. Lieutenant Commander. Lieutenant Commander is the rank above Lieutenant and below Commander, broadly comparable to a major in the British Army in terms of responsibility and seniority. Lieutenant Commanders are senior junior officers or entry-level senior officers. They often serve as heads of department on larger warships and submarines, as executive officers on smaller vessels, or as senior specialists in warfare, engineering, aviation, and logistics. Many will have around 8 to 12 years of commissioned service by the time they reach this rank. The insignia on cuff and shoulder is 1 thick gold ring with 1 medium-width gold ring above it, and a topmost ring carrying the Royal Navy Executive Curl, clearly marking a step up in authority from a lieutenant. Commander. Commander is the rank above Lieutenant Commander and below Captain, broadly comparable to a Lieutenant Colonel in the British Army. Commanders are established senior officers. They command frigates, destroyers, submarines and aviation squadrons, or serve as second-in-command or department heads in major shore establishments and higher headquarters. A commander will typically have around 15 to 18 years of commissioned service, combining sea commands, staff tours and specialist appointments. The insignia on cuff and shoulder is 3 thick gold rings with the uppermost carrying the Royal Navy Executive Curl, making commanders immediately recognisable as senior seagoing and staff leaders. Captain. Captain is the rank above Commander and below Commodore, broadly comparable to a colonel in the British Army in seniority and level of command. Captains usually have around 20 or more years of commissioned service and are trusted with some of the most demanding posts in the Royal Navy, such as commanding major warships, submarines and large shore establishments, or serving as senior staff officers in Fleet and Defence Headquarters. The insignia on cuff and shoulder is 4 gold rings, with the top ring carrying the Royal Navy Executive Curl, clearly marking them out as very senior officers. Promotion to captain is competitive and normally comes only after successful command and strong performance reports as a commander, with selection for one of the relatively small number of captain appointments. Commodore. Commodore is the rank above captain and below Rear Admiral, roughly comparable to a brigadier in the British Army in terms of seniority and scope of command. Commodores are 1-star officers who typically lead groups of ships or submarines, specialist flotillas, or major maritime formations and headquarters branches, setting priorities for several commanding officers, rather than a single unit. On the cuff, their insignia is a single broad gold ring with the Royal Navy Executive Curl forming a loop above it. On the shoulder board, they wear a gold board with a Tudor crown at the top, a cross sword and baton beneath it, and a star at the base, marking them as the first level of flag officer in the service. Rear Admiral. Rear Admiral is the rank above Commodore and below Vice Admiral, making it the Royal Navy's 2-star flag officer rank and broadly comparable to a Major General in the British Army. Rear Admirals often command large task groups, maritime components within joint commands, or hold senior posts in fleet headquarters directing operations, capability and training across significant parts of the Navy. On the cuff, they wear a single broad gold ring with the second ring above it carrying the Royal Navy Executive Curl. On the shoulder board, they have a gold board with a Tudor crown at the top, cross sword and baton beneath it, and 2 stars arranged, marking them clearly as a 2-star flag officer. Vice Admiral. Vice Admiral is the rank above Rear Admiral and below Admiral, making it the Royal Navy's 3-star flag officer rank and broadly comparable to a Lieutenant General in the British Army in seniority. Vice Admirals hold some of the highest operational and strategic posts in the Navy and wider defence, such as fleet commanders, senior joint headquarters appointments or top-level capability and policy roles that influence thousands of personnel and major parts of the defence budget. On the cuff, their insignia is a single, broad gold ring with 2 medium-width rings above it, with the top ring carrying the Royal Navy Executive Curl. On the shoulder board, they wear a gold board with a Tudor crown at the top, cross sword and baton beneath it, and 3 stars arranged, identifying them as 3-star flag officers. Admiral. Admiral is the rank above Vice Admiral and below Admiral of the Fleet, making it the Royal Navy's 4-star flag officer rank and broadly comparable to a general in the British Army in seniority. Admirals occupy the very highest operational and strategic posts in the Navy and wider defence, such as Fleet Commander, Senior Joint Commanders, or heads of major capability areas, where their decisions shape entire theatres of operations and long-term naval policy. On the cuff, they wear a single broad gold ring with 3 medium-width rings above it, with the upper ring carrying the Royal Navy Executive Curl. On the shoulder board, they have a gold board with a Tudor crown at the top, cross sword and baton beneath it, and 4 stars arranged below it, clearly marking them as 4-star flag officers. Admiral of the Fleet. Admiral of the Fleet is the highest rank in the Royal Navy, historically a 5-star rank equivalent to a Field Marshal in the British Army, and is now usually only awarded in wartime or as an honorary appointment. Officers promoted to this level have typically held the very top operational and strategic posts, such as Professional Head of the Royal Navy and Senior NATO or National Commands, and are recognised for exceptional service over a career often spanning well over 35 to 40 years. On the cuff, they wear a single broad gold ring with 4 medium-width rings above it, with the upper ring carrying the Royal Navy Executive Curl. On the shoulder board, they display a gold board with a Tudor crown at the top, crossed sword and baton beneath it, and a laurel wreath behind it, marking them as the Navy's highest possible rank.